much more than just security, but it's also about control and the Egypt LCC has built.
And the poverty has gotten so bad in Egypt that they stopped publishing figures altogether several years ago.
So why build such a huge project that's cost billions of dollars? Who's it really for, and what does it tell us about the Egypt of today?
So on one level, it's meant to kind of be part of his broader grandiose vision for building a new Egyptian state, as he's described it over the years. And so there's this new administrative capital estimated to cost somewhere around $58 billion. It's a massive undertaking, moving all of kind of the key ministries of the Egyptian government to this new capital city, away from the population center of Cairo, which Greater Cairo hosts at least 25 million people. And in his speech, he made it clear that part of his objective here was to insulate the halls of power from potential pressure, as he put it.
So Carlos is saying that the Octagon isn't a standalone project. It's actually part of a much broader plan, the construction of Egypt's new administrative capital, a brand new city in the desert near Cairo. Now, according to Caldas, one reason for this drastic move is to put some physical distance between Egypt's ruling class and those frustrated with them.
Sisi and frankly leaders all across the Arab world have been fixated on trying to shield themselves from the threat of uprisings in the future after what they saw in 2011.
Some background first. Caldas is referring to the Arab Spring of the early 2010s that swept across the region. In Egypt, mass protests brought down President Hosni Mubarak, rattling the ruling classes. Caldas says protecting the regime from future unrest is only part of the story. It's also important to understand the role the military plays in Egypt.
The Egyptian military is involved in contracting construction of buildings, of infrastructure, roads, bridges, etc. They own hotels, they own fish farms, poultry farms, they make macaroni, they have multiple bottled water brands, they own gas stations, the list goes on.
Macaroni? The military makes pasta and own petrol stations and hotels? Now, I'm not sure about you, but that's not what comes to mind when I think of the military. But that's precisely the point Caldas is making. In Egypt, the military is a major economic player, and that helps explain why projects like the Octagon matter.
Sisi has had the Egyptian state borrow unsustainable amounts of money to finance projects that are overseen by companies owned by the military. So if you want to do big business in Egypt, you have a dependency on finding a way to deal with the Egyptian military and the companies that they control. So it gives them a lot of influence and control over kind of the business elite in the country as well. So they're taking their cut, they're getting their shares, and they're also controlling the distribution of capital in the country to a large extent.
All right, so Caldas is saying the military isn't just protecting the state. Its influence also stretches deep into Egypt's economy and major aspects of the society. It's important to stress, while fancy new projects are built like the Octagon, many ordinary Egyptians are facing a different reality.
Food insecurity is on the rise. Poverty, as I said, has gone so bad that they don't publish the figures anymore. There's been multiple collapses in the currency. Inflation, there's been multiple historic spikes in inflation. In 2023, inflation reached 40%, 70% on food and beverages. So the Egyptians have dealt with so much economic pressure under him, while watching specific elites and politically powerful institutions like the military enrich themselves. They've seen the new capital go up, they've seen the new monorail, they've seen presidential palaces getting built, and so Egyptians are very frustrated, and they're really struggling. And that's really the fundamental problem.
As the huge projects are being built, frustration is growing. But how is this addressed? According to Caldas, the answer lies in how Egypt is governed.
It's also a highly repressive one. You have Egypt has tens of thousands of political prisoners. They have enforced disappearances quite frequently, so people are literally disappeared without the family knowing where they were, where they're being detained or what charges they're being held for. There are people that are in pretrial detention for years at a time without really going on trial and getting some sort of judgment one way or the other. So there is a lot of risk of challenging the authorities, and the elections are not genuine competitive elections.
So while frustration may be simmering, turning that into an organized opposition is a different matter, and that's important because it brings us back to the Octagon. Caldas believes this mega project isn't just a military headquarters, but a symbol of President El-Sisi's efforts to protect the system he's built.
The new administrative capital, having been built from scratch in the surveillance era, is much more controllable, much more observable. And so if there was an uprising that reached it, they would have much more capability to monitor it extremely closely and find avenues for repressing it.
Now, supporters of El-Sisi would strongly disagree with Caldas' interpretation, and to understand why, we can't forget that Egypt is in a pretty volatile part of the world. It borders Gaza and Israel, Sudan to the south is at war, and Libya to its west is deeply unstable. So those defending the idea of the Octagon argue it's essential for national security and stability.
Egyptians look at their neighbors and they see a lot of horrific situations, right? The message from the leadership is, unlike those countries, you have a strong military that protects you, that prevents you from experiencing those things. And this is part of how he tries to deter public pressure for change. Imagine what would happen if we weren't here.
Right, so El-Sisi's supporters believe a strong military helps Egypt avoid the chaos happening around it. And at the same time, Egypt sees itself as a powerhouse in the region. But influence can be expensive, and that increasingly means Egypt needs support from abroad. For a long time, it's received significant amounts of military aid from the US, and recently it's also had substantial support from Gulf states.
In 2024, when Egypt received what amounted to a $57 billion bailout, 35 of it came from the United Arab Emirates. That $35 billion is 10% of Egypt's GDP last year.
Now, you might be seeing the contradiction there. Egypt is projecting strength, but its economy depends heavily on support from outside. And that brings us to President El-Sisi himself.
One of the things to keep in mind that I think is quite striking about this presidency is President Sisi wants all the power, but not necessarily any of the responsibility of governing Egypt. It's no coincidence that Egypt went from a country that was not a major source of irregular migration when he came to power to being the second largest nationality reaching Europe through irregular means last year. It is because not only are things bad and keep getting worse, there is really, amongst many Egyptians, no hope that it's going to get better.
Now, the Octagon is certainly impressive in size, but for Timothy Caldas, it's a lot more than just a huge piece of architecture. He sees it as a symbol of modern Egypt under President El-Sisi. Powerful, yet reliant on outside support. Ambitious, but indebted. Thanks for